summer winding down? Things are good?
Summer winding down. Things are not good because my Yankees took an L down in Miami, lost to one of the worst teams in baseball, but it is what it is. Got an off day. Hopefully they regroup. We bounce back.
Yeah, they don't. None of it matters, man. It's coming down to one game. You got one game.
The wild card?
Yeah, you got one game for your season.
You're losing.
I held out hope that maybe they could catch the Reds. Maybe.
Yeah, right.
Maybe.
For like a day and a half.
Good
Hey, if you're a kid these days and you've got the most coveted toy in your possession and you're not going to play with it, like that Nintendo Power Pad that Chris Canty used to have, why not see if any of your friends would maybe trade you something for it? That's where the Oakland Raiders sit with all-pro defensive end Khalil Mack. The Raiders don't seem to want to keep him. At least a dozen teams have reportedly reached out to the Raiders multiple times, the most recent being the Jets. So, Canty, I ask you, should the Jets deal for a Nintendo Power Pad and Khalil Mack?
100%, Jenna. This is one of those no-brainer situations. If Khalil Mack is available, Mike Maccagnan has to make the deal. When I had a chance to talk to Mike Mack during the preseason, one of the things I asked him was about his defense and specifically about his pressure players, because they don't have a lot of guys that can win one-on-one on the edge on their roster. And he didn't rule out the possibility that they could potentially look to trade before the regular season to bring back one of those pieces. He volunteered that information, but now after the news earlier this week about them being interested in Dante Fowler Jr. and then the Khalil Mack report surfacing, it's starting to look like the Jets are trying to get that one missing piece from their defense. If you look at all three levels of their defense, the edge pressure player is the only thing that's missing right now.
Well, let me ask you this. This is what would you do, and then also, given your relationship with Maccagnan, what do you think he would do? The Jets are not going to be good this year with or without Khalil Mack. They're going to be drafting in the top 10 again, I would imagine. Would you trade a first-round pick, which could be not only top 10, maybe top 5 for Khalil Mack, and do you think the Jets would do it?
Absolutely, because when you look at what the Jets need, they're going to have the defense be the identity of this team. That's where they have most of their draft capital. And I get that you traded up to draft Sam Darnold, and this year, by and large, is about the development of Sam Darnold. But what's going to help a young quarterback? Being able to have a defense that can create extra possessions and field position so he can take advantage of those opportunities. So that's why I look at it. It's going to be a first-round plus, whatever the compensation is.
Because the Jets already don't have a 2019 second-rounder because they traded up. That's the key here, or part of it at least, is they've already traded. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. I just want the audience to remember they were drafting 6th. They traded 6 and 3 second-rounders, 2 this year and 1 next year, in order to be able to move up to 3. So if you trade for Mack, you're not drafted in the first 65 picks next year. That's what the Jets would be looking at.
But if you're looking at using a draft pick, you're probably going to think about in the first round a pressure player or a wide receiver, somebody to help Sam Darnold, because you don't have a whole lot of holes on that roster outside of those 2 or 3 respective positions. Offensive line can use an upgrade as well. So
yeah, if you're concerned about the draft pick being too high, well, then let me tell you who you'd be drafting. You're going to be drafting either one of the 4 kids from Clemson, either Nicky Bosa at Ohio State, or big man Oliver at
from Houston.
University of Houston. Now, would you rather have them or Khalil Mack, who also, sidebar, happens to be from University of Buffalo, which happens to be in New York. So you get the premier rusher, one of the premier rusher, compared to a hope and a prayer. Because out of all those players I mentioned, that's 6 defensive ends, or defensive tackles and ends, I can guarantee you 4 of them will not reach their potential. So you're rolling the dice. So that draft pick, man, you can have that draft pick because I'm trying to find a Khalil Mack. So the Jets, with their salary cap room, make an investment in your quarterback, all right, who is your future. Make an investment in your head coach. He did a remarkable job with those pieces that he's got. Man, give him a pass rush. He's a defensive specialist. As a coach, give him one of the premier pass rushers. I believe this is a no-brainer for the Jets to bring in one of the premier rushers to put him in that, to put him on the perimeter to be able to play in front of that home crowd where he is from this state playing. I believe that you're not going to get that type of value of any player. And there's some good players in this year's draft better than Khalil Mack.
No, you make a very good point. But is there something to be said for putting your trust in the general manager that he drafted, he moved up to get Sam Darnold. Let him really build this young team. You're not going to be great for the next couple of years. You're going to have an opportunity to maybe put together a lot of young guys that are going to be high in the draft and grow everybody at the same time.
Well, here's the thing, Jenna, and that's a valid concern, the culture that's in the building. But if you look at what Mike Maccagnan and Todd Bowles have done together over the course of the last couple of off seasons, they've moved on from some veteran guys in that locker room that necessarily weren't on board with what Todd Bowles wanted to do.
Yes.
They had to clean up the locker room chemistry. There were some issues going on after that Brandon Marshall, Mo Wilkerson, Darrelle Revis era of Jets football. So I think that he's done a good job of being able to do that. Now you just have to infuse the roster with talent. But the one thing that I will say, there's got to be some winning to support all of the slogans and the mantras that Todd Bowles and Mike Maccagnan have been selling those guys. I mean, it's one thing to preach it during the offseason and during the preseason, but if you're going out there in the regular season and what the Todd Bowles and Mike Maccagnan told you isn't working, you're not having success in the way of winning, then it's going to be a problem. So I think you've got to be able to go out there and get somebody like a Khalil Mack that can be a difference maker for this team.
Yeah, I support you. And there's no team, there's no franchise in any of the four major sports that can win a championship with all young players. It's nice to say, hey, we're going to groom all these players together, but you can't have that. You have to have different levels of productivity, and you have to have different levels of experience in the league, because if not, everyone's not going to gel together. You need some veteran players that are established, like Khalil Mack, to bring some stability and leadership to that organization and locker room.
And Mack is the perfect type of veteran, given your concerns, because he's 27 years old. He's entering year 5. If he were a 31-year-old pass rusher, then I would think I would be more concerned about it. To be fair, so the audience knows, I was presenting the argument against it because I thought everyone at the table was going to be for it. I also think you can get Khalil Mack. You can get Khalil Mack. Like the NFL GMs sometimes don't do this math. I don't want to trade this draft pick. What's the best case scenario for your draft pick? Like you said,
he's half as good as Khalil Mack.
Your best case scenario is one day he becomes a defensive player of the year.
Yeah.
Well, this guy already is. And the salary cap room that you mentioned is key here. There are some teams that might say, you know what? I'd rather draft a guy who could turn into him, who for the next 4 or 5 years I have on a very depressed salary, than pay a guy top of the market. But the Jets have so much cap space going into next year. They even could do a contract to where they give him an enormous bonus up front, so by the time they are paying Sam Darnold, his cap hit isn't so onerous. That's one of the issues going on with the Rams and Aaron Donald right now. They don't have a ton of cap space right now. They also know we're going to have to eventually pay Jared Goff. We don't want Donald's money to balloon at the same time we're having to pay Jared Goff. Like the Jets have a lot of weaknesses. We focus on their wide receiving core, most noteworthy. Pro Football Focus says the biggest weakness of their team is not defense, but pass rush. Pretty good run defense,
yes,
but no pressure on the quarterback. In my eyes, he's the best player in the league at getting pressure on the quarterback. If you can get him, I think that's a no-brainer for this football team.
Raiders fans, frustrated.